Hello, and welcome to the SharePoint. Oh boy, new year. You still can't get it right.
That went really well.
Ugh.
So it's 2020. Let's do it in a new way. Always start with smiles.
2020 slide didn't get updated, buddy. Vesa.
Oh, it didn't? Oh, it didn't.
Vesa.
It's January. What?
Oh my gosh.
Okay, that's
amateur hour. Amateur hour here.
Yeah.
In 2020. Hold on one second, folks. We're not going to do this to you. We've got to at least get the dates right on the slides. Back here is wrong. Get that fixed.
That's on me.
Oh my gosh. Yes, it's on you.
Yeah. I take full responsibility of that one. So
that's what threw me off as I was trying to start the. There we go. Presenting and hello and welcome to the SharePoint Framework and JavaScript Special Interest Group. It is our first meeting of 2020. Welcome. We've got a great agenda for you here today. Wow, what? Great agenda for you here today. Starting off, we'll have our updates on SharePoint Framework. We'll have the Patterns and Practices program updates across our offerings. And we've got three great demos or discussions today from David, Joel, and Vesa, talking first about getting started on consuming community GitHub samples. Joel's got a cool thing around Project Online REST APIs with SharePoint Framework. Excited to see that. That's some work that's been going on now for a while, and it's neat to see that finally get out and released and for folks to be able to use that. So that's going to be really great. And then Vesa's got a demo around the upcoming features for SPFX version 1.10. But as we get going, always like to remind folks opportunities to participate in SPFX or any of our special interest group calls. Of course, we always encourage you to do demos, very valuable demos from the community. I think the best part of these calls are the demos. If you have done any work around SPFX, so that could be web parts, application customizers, or really anything else related there, as well as anything using any of the @PnP offerings, we'd love to have you demo those things on the call for us. If you're interested in demoing, please reach out to myself or Vesa. We'll get you scheduled on an upcoming call. Don't be dismayed. It might not be the immediately next call, but we will get you scheduled. We'll get you a slot and are excited to have those demos. So I know lots of folks out there are working on really exciting, really cool stuff, and we always like to see it. So if you're willing to share and would like to kind of show off your work, please let us know. Love to get you on a call to do that. We also, of course, across all our offerings and projects, accept all your contributions on GitHub. So those contributions could be things like reporting issues or ideas for new features. Always appreciate that. As well, if you have time, you can submit pull requests. All of our projects are absolutely open to accepting your pull requests and getting work from those of you out there in the community. I've already got a ton of pull requests from folks last year, and hopefully that trend will continue to grow. And then, if you also have time, and folks sometimes have questions on how to use the library or certain things aren't working for them, and maybe you know the answer, it's always a great help if you can jump in and help those folks with their issues or questions, and it sometimes gets them help and gets them moving a little bit faster than perhaps waiting for one of the core team members to have the time to jump in and do that. So encourage you to get involved and help out on GitHub. Always appreciate that from everybody. And then finally, we always are looking for feedback. So how are these calls going? How is our documentation across all our projects? Where else can we help? And of course, positive feedback is okay too. We always appreciate hearing what we're doing well, because that means maybe we can focus on doing a little bit more of that or bringing that to the fore a little bit more. So thank you for all of your feedback and contributions and demos last year, and then look forward, of course, to all of that continuing to grow and accelerate into 2020. If you need any help on getting started with GitHub, we do have a AKMS Sharing is Caring repository. That's a project that's gotten spun up to really help folks get involved and help you understand how to navigate things, maybe submit your first pull request, submit your first issue, stuff like that. So very much encouraging folks to get involved. If you have questions, do reach out. spdev-docs there will get you all of the SharePoint developer documentation all up. SPDev-videos will take you to our YouTube channel, where you've got recordings from all of our calls, so the monthly calls, the special interest group calls, as well as series of videos, tutorials on all sorts of things. So whether it's provisioning, getting started with SharePoint Framework, getting started with CLI, PMPJS, etc. Great videos, lots of value there. If you're getting started or can't remember how to do a certain thing, usually there'll be a short little video to help you out with that. So definitely check out the YouTube channel. We've got a lot of content there and a lot of great content planned, of course, for the upcoming year. SPDev-issues is your issues list to report all things around SharePoint modern development. So that could be stuff around client-side pages. That could be stuff around SharePoint Framework. That could be stuff related to the product itself or the service. That is monitored by the SharePoint product group, and that'll get routed to the right folks. So if you have an issue there, of course, report it. If you're having an issue with any of the PnP offerings, please do report those to their respective repositories. For example, an issue with PnPjs should go to the PnPJS repo, whereas SPDev-issues, that link will take you to the place to report more service and product issues. And then finally, two open source organizations, github.com/SharePoint and then github.com/PnP. So the /SharePoint repository is mostly all the official offerings from the product group in terms of samples, libraries, places to report issues, and documentation. And then github.com/PnP is the PnP offerings, most of the PnP offerings. Some of the PnP offerings are still living in the SharePoint org for historical reasons, but encourage you to check out both. Lots of great resources there. And of course, if you have issues, please report them to the right places. Love to hear about that. And so Vesa, if you want to take away for your SharePoint framework update.
Yep, absolutely. Let's go these one by one. So nothing new dramatical here. We actually talked about these things a few times already, but I'll do some live demos later on today. But first of all, on the SharePoint Framework side of the house, the growth has been quite phenomenal on the usage. So these are two charts which are showing the third party, so custom SPFX extensibility being used in SharePoint Online worldwide. And we're obviously we have internal metrics which we are using to figure out how people are using extensibility and how much people are using classic extensibility versus new extensibility. And this shows the third-party SPFX usage. And you can see the nice growth during August timeframe. You can also see that in the holiday season, as expected, there's a quite big drop, which is a good thing. So people are taking time to spend time with their families and relaxing and charging their batteries. But growth has been really big. December 2019 was still, regardless of the slowness due to the holiday season, it was by far, well, not by far, but still it was the number one month-over-month usage on SPFX. So usage is growing, looking really good. Let's go to the next slide. This one we had actually last time already. So this one originally was planned to be part of, to get announced as part of the SharePoint Framework 1.10 release, which is around the pre-allocated space on the SharePoint Framework extension placeholders. And but since this is a server-side feature, and we actually pushed it out before Christmas because it was a server-side release and it does not have any client-side dependencies as such. We were able to actually release that from a documentation perspective before Christmas. And just to recap that one, that was the whole thing that you're able to book the height of the extension beforehand so that it will reduce the flickering of the page. It does not completely remove the flickering of the page when we're loading stuff on the page, but it does reduce that from an ISV perspective as an example. Let's move forward. These are just, again, two recap slides, which we had here for quite a long time already. 1.10, it was originally planned to get released before Christmas, but then I think it was a wise decision. It's not a smart thing to release something just before everybody goes to a vacation. So if there would have been any surprises related on the releases, then there would not have been anybody in Redmond to help to resolve the issues. And that was the main reason why we delayed the release of 1.10. We're still in the holiday season this week. Starting from next week, we are moving away from the holiday season and we are back in normal business. So I can kind of predict when the release will happen, unless there's any any last-minute delays or findings as part of the documentation and testing work, which we do right now. So we're doing kind of a final validation on the 1.10 release because we want to make sure that when it's out, it is fully functioning. So the extensions pre-allocated placeholders, technically it's already out. SPFX Teams, personal app support, super easy thing to do. I'll show that one in practice today. SPFX for Teams support for mobile apps should be actually available already. And list notification API moved to GA. And then two really interesting preview capabilities. So query extensions, I'll show how it looks like from a code perspective today. And then the SharePoint framework for Office add-ins. We start with a Outlook web access support, and I'll show that one today as well. What we're going to do in 2020, really cool stuff in the pipeline. Obviously, we will keep on improving the baseline. We will keep on releasing 1.11, 1.12, but then at the same time, we're introducing new additional capabilities like the native support for Fluid framework, whenever the Fluid is available for us to take fully advantage. If you're not familiar with what Fluid framework actually means, have a look on our Ignite presentations and build presentations and videos. It is a really cool thing as well. SharePoint framework support in a store is coming, so that's a really cool thing as well. So you're able to then start able to have an offerings in the app stores, which are based on SharePoint framework, and we're getting that more and more integrated across the Microsoft 365 stack. So sooner or later, you're able to create one component and then deploy that to any of the applications in the Office 365 or Microsoft 365. Unified tools chain, that's basically extending SPFX bigger than what it is, because it's not just about SharePoint framework anymore. Faster inner dev loop, we're looking into releasing once a month. This is our really what we want to do. We are trying to get that one once a month release cycle moving already in autumn, which we failed due to numerous reasons, but we're really looking into making that happen. And more extensions. So in the UI, for example, navigation extensions, override left navigation, top navigation, override controls, and all of that stuff is in the pipeline as well. But that's it for now. For me, I will show some of this stuff live when we get to the right stage.
Now I'm, struggling on moving slides today. It's the holidays. I am not caught back up. So PnPjs updates. We released V2 right before the holidays. So unlike a professional organization, as Vesa described, not releasing things before a holiday, we did. So just a heads up, documentation updated at AKMS PnPJS. This is a major release, so it is a breaking change. We're starting to get issues, some folks coming in and saying my old code isn't working. Your old code will not just work if you install the new PnPJS. The preset /all is your friend. Please do check out the documentation and the transition guide. If there's stuff missing there in terms of guidance for transitioning, please let us know. We will get that updated. Of course, accept pull requests and updates on that if you have time. And just by sort of semi-frequent reminder, if you are reporting an issue across any of the repositories, please do provide us enough details that we can understand what's going on. Remember, you might have been fighting an issue for a number of hours or days, hopefully not, but perhaps, and you're very familiar with it, and we aren't. So folks looking at the issues are coming into it with no context at all. So please make sure there's enough details in the issue that we can understand your problem or your question, and we'll do our best to help out. And also checking more of the boxes at the top, like if you have a question and calling it a bug, it doesn't really change the priority at all. We do try and deal with everything as quickly as we can. So just sort of be as honest as you can with as much detail as you can, and we'll do our best to help you out. Did want to say also, we've got some great videos coming soon, thanks to David Warner, around getting started with PnPjs V2. Saw a preview of the first one of those today. Those are looking great, and we'll get that. We'll get those out over the next coming weeks. Support plan, we've talked about that before. That's outlined there. We don't need to necessarily go through that again. But links down there to the documentation, pnp.github.io/PnPjs, hashtag PnPjs on Twitter. And you can follow, of course, me at Mediocre Bowler on Twitter. So look forward to working with everybody on V2. We've already gotten a few issues. Obviously, it's a new big release. We missed a few things, or a few things aren't quite working exactly right. Really appreciate folks reporting that stuff. We'll have a new V2 release out the 10th of January to hopefully clean up a lot of that. And then as well, we will have a 1.3, I think it'd be 1.39, I believe, on the 10th of January. So we'll be updating version 1 then as well. So moving into the, Rabbits are still running around. There we go. CLI. New version of the CLI is out as well. So really big release, great release to see there. So a lot of great stuff on OneDrive reporting, Outlook reporting, SharePoint site URL renaming, SharePoint feature disabling, Yammer message removal, and then Power Apps and Power Automate connector listing. So really great to see that. It's a big release. A lot of work went into that from Waldeck and the community. So I wanted to say thank you to everybody there. Great work to see that get out. More stuff in progress, of course, and you can always install the latest beta versions from npm install-g at PnP/Office365-CLI at next. We'll get you the latest beta versions. Down in the bottom right corner, you've got a hashtag for Twitter at hashtag Office365 CLI on Twitter, Gitter channel there, and then as well the docs aka.ms O365 CLI for all the details on getting started with the CLI. So lots and lots of great stuff in there. Excited to see all the different projects coming out with releases or being active and getting some great work. Speaking of, work continues and improvements continue on the reusable controls. These are a set of React controls. There's two separate packages. One is the property controls designed to help you get a great out-of-the-box editing experience. So that'd be the edit pane in your web parts in SPFX. And then the second set is a set of content controls or body controls, which look great in your the body of, it could be using an application customizer or a web part in SPFX. So excited to see that work continue. And of course, a bunch of great contributors helping out with these as well. So really excited to see all of these projects getting contributors and getting built up, and excited to see what comes out this year as we continue to grow and get more folks involved. And then last but not least, the SPFX Community Generator. So this is a Yeoman generator built on top of the sort of out-of-the-box standard Microsoft generator. And what that means is you're going to get a real SPFX project with all the same dependencies and files and such included, but also with the ability to add a lot more customizations and things to your project out of the gate. So this is really great, especially in a large shop. Perhaps you got a lot of developers. It's a great way to really standardize your project setup experience. So if you want to use Webpack Bundle Analyzer or Vue or Office 365 CLI or any of these other resources, you can have them already added into your projects as you get started. So great to see this work moving forward as well. Lots of great contributors there. So definitely check out all of those things. A lot of great contributions from folks out in the community across all of these. And I want to say thank you, of course, for all of that work. And I've been talking very quickly because we've got 3 big demos today. I want to make sure folks have time. Will the PnP generator include V2? Yes, at some point it will. It does not currently, but at some point it will. If you're interested, that might be a great contribution for somebody to get involved. With that, David, are you ready to take over?
Yes, sir. Let me go ahead and share my desktop. All right, so getting started with using SPFX samples, we're going to talk today about how to start using the PnP SPFX web parts extension and other samples. When we launched Sharing is Caring initiative to assist with contributing to the PnP GitHub repositories, we also started getting some feedback that there's not only new developers to the community that want to contribute, but there's also new developers to the community that want to consume, and GitHub is still new to them. So today we're going to talk about how new developers to the community can start taking advantage of some of these when you maybe are not experienced with a GitHub site. We'll show how you can start using that. So the agenda for the demo is we're going to cover some of the development prerequisites. And then we're going to see how we can find a sample. There's some fantastic sample galleries that have been created by newly awarded MVP Hugo Bernier, so thank you for those. We're going to see how you can download samples. There is going to be a couple forks in the road that we're going to talk about throughout the demo today so that you're not caught off guard. You'll have options available, and we'll discuss what those options are. And then we'll just take a quick look at development and packaging, some guidance, tips, and tricks. All right, so development prerequisites. The only two things you need to consume, and I'll clarify that in a moment, to consume samples from the PnP repositories is Node 8 or 10. 10 is recommended because it is the newest, latest, and greatest that is supported with 1.9.1. From there, you need a package manager. Typically, NPM is the one that is recommended and comes with Node, so you'll already have that installed. And then Gulp is required. You will then need a code editor of choice. Of course, VS Code is recommended. It's highly integrated and works fantastic with SPFX. And then optionally, you can also install Git. And we'll talk about why that's optional in a moment. So it may be new to you, may not want to install it. There is a path of least resistance that avoids that as you get to that fork in the road. Now, to clarify, when I say only NPM and Gulp, this is just to consume pre-existing solutions. So if you are looking to create new solutions, there's a larger tool chain you'll need, the Yeoman Generator, as well as Yeoman itself. But if you're just starting out and you want to learn by sample, then certainly you can use just Gulp, Node, and NPM to get the job done. And the installation procedure for it is right there, npm install -g, which is going to install it into your global node modules, and then it's going to install Gulp. So the best place to start, of course, is aka.ms SPFX. So that's where we're going to go ahead and go to now to take a look. We'll go ahead and come to an open browser. We'll load it, and it takes us to, right here, SPFX, wrong link. Just want to do, and that's going to take you to the overview of the SharePoint framework. Then you can go into getting started and set up your development environment. Now, as you scroll down, you'll see what the developer tools are that are required. So we've got Node LTS version 10, but you'll notice that there's also Node 8 and 10 supported. We'll talk about that a little bit more because there is some things you need to be aware of as we go through deciding which sample you may want to use. But of course, installing Node is one of the first prereqs. And then you'll notice it goes into installing Yeoman and Gulp in the SharePoint generator. But again, for consuming the samples alone, all you'll need is Gulp as defined in that slide. So let's go take a look then at the gallery of samples that are available to us. If you go to SPFX -webparts, aka.ms SPFX-webparts, you'll land here. Now there's gonna be a collection of links that I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that you have access to near the end. So you'll get those links near the end of the call. You don't have to worry about writing all this down now. And you can go to the sample sections right here up in the menu. There is a sample section. Now, if you click there, this new gallery is fantastic. It's gonna go ahead and let you scan through and browse through the available web parts. In this case, it is web parts. There is one for the extensions as well. And you can go through by year, by author, by compatibility, by framework, which shows you the different libraries or frameworks that it will work with or it was built for. Today, we're going to go ahead and go through a demo of looking by SPFX version. And so we're going to come over to 1.7.0 and you can browse through. And this is a great way to learn some of the techniques of SPFX as well. And we're going to go highlight, of course, a simple one that I'm familiar with. So we'll go ahead and use a dynamic bundling and loading of SPFX packages. So at this point, you may say, great, I see one. I want to learn a little bit more about it. And so you can click on it. I'm going to go ahead and right click on it and open it in a new tab. And it's going to take us now to that sample in the repo. We see that we've now left the nice, pretty looking environment that had been provided to us by Hugo. And now we're in more of the hardcore GitHub, could be a little intimidating environment. So if we scroll down, we understand what it should do. We can see the README. At this point, we may say, great, this is a sample that we want to use. How do we get to it? I don't see a download. I don't see how I would access this. Well, you want to go to the top of the repos, and you can get there by either clicking here, which will take you to the top of that repo, or right here. Those both take you to the top of that repo using the breadcrumb. So that's what we're going to do. When we go to the top of the repo, now we see something that maybe stands out to us. We see this clone or download option. And this is where we get to that fork in the road. We have choices to make. If we click on this, it brings up a little drop down that says that we can clone with Git or we can download as a zip. So let's start with the first option. If you did install zip, then you have that available to clone. I'm going to go ahead and copy that URL. You'll copy the URL. And then I'm going to go ahead and go into an Explorer window and a command prompt. Now, what I've done is I've set up 3 different folders here to kind of accelerate and show the concept that we're going to show for your options today. We'll start with SPFX Web Parts Clone because that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to go over into that folder. I'm already in that folder here in my command prompt. And so I'm going to type git clone, and I'm just going to paste the URL that I had just copied. Now, if I hit Enter, it's going to start downloading it. You can see it's already started downloading it here in my Explorer window. This is a very large repo, a little over 500 megs, so we're not going to sit here and wait for that to be done, but just know that this would finish, and then we would be able to go into that folder and see our web parts available to us. Now, that is if you have Git installed. What if you don't? What if you don't want to install Git? The second option is you can download the entire repo as a zip. And so if I were to click on it or right click on it and save link as, it will bring up an option. I've already got it pre-loaded into my SPFX web parts downloaded, and it will download it as a zip. And you can see it's a few hundred megs. So we're not going to go through the process just for time savings on this demo of actually downloading it, but know that that is a way you could download it. Once you do that, we'll go back to our here, and you can just simply extract it. Again, 500 megs, it's going to take a few minutes to do that. So we're not necessarily going to go ahead and do that. I've already pre-downloaded it for time purposes. So if I go here, back up into my Explorer window to SPFX web parts, this is what we would be presented with if we were to extract that, or if we were to git clone the repo. We'll have our web parts. And now we know that I wanted to utilize a sample, so we'll go into samples, and I wanted to use the JS dynamic bundling libraries. So now I've gone there. Now this is where you can start actually getting into the code. You've downloaded all of the samples, but some things are needed for us to go ahead and start building this. We'll want to do an npm install so that we get our node modules. And you'll notice that the node module is already there. We'll talk about that in a moment. I preloaded that as well for time. So I'm going to copy that URL, and I'm going to go ahead and do a clear screen here. We're going to move to that location in my Explorer window. And just to make sure that everything looks right, we know we had to have Node installed. We know that we needed to have gulp installed. So we see there that version 10.18 is the current latest version of Node LTS that's supported. And we have gulp installed, and we have npm installed right here as we're doing an npm list and checking for our node version. So at this point, we would be fully ready to do an npm install. But there's one thing, if you're new to the development environment, you may not know, and that is that SharePoint Framework has not always supported version 10.1 or a version 10 of Node. And so at a certain point in history, specifically SharePoint Framework 1.8.2 is where that support for Node 10 began. And eventually Node 8 will be removed, but is still supported. So at this point, if we were to try to do a build or a npm install or a gulp serve using Node, we would eventually run into some errors. And so you may say, well, okay, well, now I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. You told me to install version 10. I've done that, but now you're telling me that version, a sample from less than version 1.8.2 has been used. What do I do? Typically, you would have to go in and uninstall Node 10 and reinstall Node 8, and that is fully supported if you want to do that. There is a better option that is available to you, and it's called NVM. And there's an article here by Andrew Connell, which talks about node management with Node Version Manager. It is supported on both Linux, Mac, as well as Windows. And so again, I'll include this link, but allows you to swap between versions of Node, and with that, different global npm packages. So that's the use case that I am going to be demoing today and showing off. I encourage it. It is not required. You could uninstall and reinstall Node if you wanted to the version that is supported by the sample that you're using, but it is important to be aware of that. And that's why we wanted to point it out, that if you are using a sample based on a version of SPFX that's less than 1.8.2, and you try to do installs and builds and serves, then you're going to probably run into issues. And so you want to be aware of that. So now let's go ahead and we'll go back here and we'll try to make sense of that. So using NVM, there's that article on it. I encourage you. There's a lot of documentation, so we're not going to dive into how to use it, but I'm simply going to show how to switch between versions of Node. So I said NVM use 8.17, which we know is supported for 171. We want to confirm all of that looks good. So we'll go ahead and do the same check we did before. We see we're using Node version 8.17.0. We know that we are now using just gulp and npm again, so we would be ready to go for npm install, and we could go ahead and do that. Now again, I had mentioned I had already done that here, so we already have that. It takes some time on machines, and so I wanted to save that time for us just to sit here in silence. And so now we're ready to go ahead and gulp serve. I've got my sample ready to go. I'll go ahead and paste gulp serve no browser because I've already got my hosted workbench open and ready to go. And this should load momentarily. It shouldn't take but a couple seconds for this to execute. And there we go, it's running. Everything looks to be executing. It's configuring the Webpack as we see. And we should be ready to load our sample momentarily. And there we go, we're ready to go. So if I go back into the browser and I come over to my workbench, I'll go ahead and just refresh so it establishes a context to my local server. And I go ahead and look for dynamic. We see I've got my dynamic bundling example here. It loads. This particular one shows how to dynamically bundle and import jQuery. So if I click on this button right here, it should give me a message that jQuery has dynamically been imported. So great. Now I know it's working. I've been able to utilize the sample, and at that point, I am technically ready to package it and bundle it if I want. From there, you would simply execute your batch, and you can type gulp clean, gulp bundle, -- ship, gulp package solution, -- ship, and it'll run through the necessary gulp tasks and the web packing and the bundling of our solution. And eventually, we will end up with a SharePoint folder, a solution with a dynamic bundling package ready to deploy. And that's how you can utilize the samples. Now, if I go back to our slides, here is a collection of useful links. So we've got a lot of aka.ms short URLs available to us to the various web parts, extensions, library components, and solutions. There's also a compatibility metrics that Hugo created that helps maybe keep track of what versions of SPFX are supported by what versions of Node. Andrew Connell is a great article here on SPFX versions of the generator to install, helps understand some of those concepts. And then of course the NVM version manager. And once you're comfortable with consuming, I would be remiss if I didn't also offer you the initiative to contribute back. So we certainly encourage, as Patrick brought out earlier on this call, to encourage everyone to contribute back. And once you get to that point where you're comfortable and would like to do that, then there's certainly help for you to do that. That's it. Thank you.
Stuff. Thank you, David. Hopefully that will help folks get involved. Great to see that walk through there. Certainly check out the Sharing is Caring resources. So folks, if you have questions, that's a great way to get involved or see how to perhaps make your first contribution or how to use and consume these samples as outlined in the demo here today. So up next is Joel. Yep.
So my name is Joel Rodrigues. I'm a SharePoint developer at Storm, a company based in Dublin. You can get links to my Twitter account and blah, blah, blah. So the presentation is a project module for PnPjs, and this happened when I was working on my previous job on a company which was quite strong in project, and as a SharePoint developer, it happened that I had to work with some bits of project, and I had a massive resistance at the beginning when trying to deal with the toolchain they had and the common approaches for customizing the sites, which for us, we are SharePoint developers. We look at the site and it's just a SharePoint site with extra bits. So I thought, well, that can't be that hard to use the SharePoint tools on the same scenario. Why do I have to use tools that were common in the SharePoint space like 2 or 3 years ago, or maybe more than that? So I started looking around, and while I was working on it, I found some barriers which I noticed that had a massive impact, slowing me down in progress, which was the learning curve for the product. I didn't know the project REST APIs, so everything was me trying to, on the browser, trying to find endpoints and things like that, or a similar experience. The standards are a bit mixed, and as I mentioned, there was no really modern development story like we had in SPFX. So I started playing around and eventually tried SPFX. It just worked straight away. There was no surprise there. Web parts work on classic pages and project has classic pages. Everything was fine. So we get immediately all the benefits from SPFX. As we all know, there is a good development story, documentation. You can pick any framework you want. And you get, of course, support using web parts for classic pages. And on top of that, you get the extensibility options for calling graph and the third-party APIs. And all the bits and bobs that you get from SharePoint Framework. You get a lot of advantages compared to the common scenarios. So the project module for PnPjs everything was good when I started being able to hook SPFX in project, but the REST API was still a big barrier. So I looked around and found the first development version of this package by Pavel. I have a link to the initial repo here, which I then end up cloning, and at some point I end up recreating from basically clone from PnPjs, so I could easily update to the latest versions without depending on Pavel, because my pull request, the first pull request I submitted to this original repo is still open, so I don't think Pavel is maintaining the repository anymore. But anyway, all the credit for the code is really his. I just basically used it to fix a few bugs and end up publishing, so it's easier to consume. So the package works pretty much the same as the SP package for PnPjs and covers the underscore API project server endpoint in Project Online. So this is a development version, kind of, even though I've used it in production already in some scenarios. You get all the helpers and all the structure from PnPjs, which you can't go wrong with. So this, just to make clear to everyone, not to Patrick, this is not in the main PnPjs repository. It's a package you can install completely separate from PnP at the moment, at least. It's not 100% production ready. Some endpoints I just had no time to test, and I know there are still some issues in some operations that don't work yet. But if you have the need, test it, make your own judgment, see if it works on the scenarios that you need. The coverage is already massive. I will say maybe 80–90% of the endpoints. So it's a lot of work there, especially from Pavel. So let me show this. So the original repository, as I mentioned, you can get a link from the slides as well. As you can see, my pull request is still here, and yeah, actually 1 year tomorrow. So I don't think this is being maintained. This solution here is in the repository that David was just showing. It's called React-PnPjs-project-online. you can get the code. This is just a sample code, just some sample code to call some endpoints that I created. The UI is terrible, and it's here just so I can easily invoke the functions. But you can get things like get projects, and as you can see, you get everything. You can use all the benefits of PnPjs, things like select or orders. This is currently working with the latest version of PnPjs 1, not 2. So keep that in mind if you give that a try, because you will need to install dependencies for PnP command, PnP logging, and PO data. But you can install those from npm. Just target the latest 1.x version, and everything should work. I have a blog post I'll show in a moment. So as an example, we get all these. So let me pick a project here. And I'm just logging everything on the console, but you can see that operations. In here, I'm just hitting a lot of endpoints for the project resource. My mouse batteries are dying, I think. So as you can see, there's a lot of data being returned. And this is everything you can get at the moment, if I'm not wrong, from the package in the project endpoint. But there is lots of endpoints you can get there, like tasks, or you can have even add things like other project. And that takes a little bit, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, or update the project, which does supports all the operations you need, like checkout, and then you update, you publish, and then you check in again the project. All of this is already supported, which is very useful. You get things like tasks. So just to show a few endpoints, you get all the information. If we look at the code, if you are familiar with PnPjs, then you know that it would be something like this, and that's it. All you need is an async method or promises if you prefer, and then you just await, and you can go. You get IntelliSense dot, and then you get everything from here. You can go projects dot. If you want, for example, to add a project, then you come here and you get IntelliSense on everything. It's fabulous. Project APIs are very hard, in my opinion. So this makes development extremely easier. It works everywhere the same. If someone here is watching and is from the project space and not SharePoint, then you are really missing out. Give this a try, because they will make your life so much easier. If you want to work locally, so this is the project you can install from npm if you just want to give it a try, and then you install these 3 packages as well. And this one. If you want to run in development, so you can maybe fix any bug you find or add any extra feature, you can still do it. So follow the steps that David showed before to clone the project or download. This version here on my GitHub account has the latest PnPjs, maybe not the latest now. So you can put that side by side with your project, and then build the packages. You can follow the documentation. I have the commands here that you will need on PnPjs repository, and then in your SPFX web part. Before you do that, you need to install the peer dependencies on the package. So you basically follow these steps. You need to go to the project package directory on the dist folder and then install the dependencies. And after that, you can simply install locally into your SPFX solution, and it will just work. So you can make code changes, repackage, and then everything will reflect in your SPFX project. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Very cool. And this is something I'm very excited to see get out to the community, just because I know various folks have been working on this or talking about this for a while. I hope folks check it out. If you got some project work you're doing, it's really a cool resource. Great work, Joel, on getting that out. And with that, I believe our last demo is Vesa.
Yep, I'm sharing my screen. So what I wanted to do is quickly kind of a recap what we will have in 1.10, not from a functionality perspective, actually show you some code and how things will be looking. Now, I did record a video on 1.10 and what's coming out, which is now on the chat window a while back. I think this was released in the late November, which is actually quite late. Interesting. It's been taking us slightly longer than expected to get to 1.10 out, but it's looking really positive. By the way, if you are interested on seeing any of the 2020 stuff in preview, any of this stuff or discussions around that one, there's a video on that one in the YouTube channel as well. Now, but let's actually get back on version 1.10 and its context and content and how things will work in practice. So what I wanted to do is show you a few examples and what are we actually doing here and what it means that we support, for example, personal apps for the teams, or what does it mean that we have various suggestions from a development perspective, or the Office add-in support for Outlook Quick Access. So we're going to concentrate on those three in today, and I think we should have enough time for that. If you have any questions, comments, let me know. I can see the chat on another window. So first of all, on the team side of the house, so we mentioned that the private apps will be supported in Teams, and this will be a super easy thing for you to take advantage. So already starting from, is it 1.6? No, 1.8, we started supporting Microsoft Teams tabs built with SharePoint Framework. And that was the whole thing, that we basically go to the supported hosts and select an additional value in here, which in the 1.7 case was the Teams tab. Now, what we're going to do with the 1.10 release, we're going to start supporting a Teams personal app as an option here. And what that means then that when I do the sync the Teams in the app catalog, that Teams and we will auto-generate basically the manifest for the personal app, and then that solution will be available as a personal app in a Microsoft Teams. So you can absolutely then, first of all, you can select any of the types. You can remove the SharePoint Webport. You can add any of these things and all of that stuff. That should be usable. But what it means that it's a personal app. Let's actually have a look on that one quickly. There we go. So let me actually get in here. And I think it's actually this one. Is it? It is this one. So if I'm adding a more app, I can go to my personal apps in this case. And I'm actually, what I've done here is that I've taken our example leads web part, which is one of the examples demos. I think we created originally this one for SBC 2018. So it's 1.5 years old already. But it's basically demonstrating then integration to LOB system as a Microsoft Teams tab. So now if I'm adding this, it's going to be added as a personal app. And that means that it's not in the context of a team or not in the context of a channel. It is actually a personal app, and you can technically potentially even pin it on the left menu whenever the Teams will support that properly. I don't know if it actually already supports that properly or not. But basic idea is that you're not in the context of the team or a channel, you're in the context of a persona. And this is basically the web part which is getting rendered here, and it works just like the web part as well. So no problems and no challenges on that. Pretty simple thing to do. So like I said, just setting the supported hosts as a Teams personal app, and voila, everything just works as such. Does this also support multiple tabs, web parts in a single Teams app? No. So the Teams application, so when you're writing a Microsoft Teams tab using SharePoint Framework, it is always a one web part, basically, or you might say that it's a panel which is getting exposed in the Teams side of the house. So you cannot technically have multiple things here. Now, there is one exception, though, on that one, which is you can absolutely surface any SharePoint page in the Teams as a tab. That's a separate experience. This is now an application experience, so it's not really we are not really on the SharePoint context, but you can actually get access on the application, which is automatically hosted from the SharePoint side. So, but for the Teams itself, if you go to the Teams level, you can absolutely have multiple tabs here. You can have multiple different configurations here. You can add multiple different things. You can configure those differently. You can have different instances. So that absolutely works related on Nick's comment over there. But that's something which we have been having already since 1.8, so that's nothing really new in 1.10. Now, on the 1.10 side of the house, let me actually go back on the Outlook side of the house. So on the Outlook side of the house, let me actually close that one. This is in preview. So first of all, how do we get these things to get created? Let me actually get in here. Let me slightly bump the font. Let me do that. So if I create, this is still in preview, if I create a demo folder, and if I go to the demo folder, in 1.10, because the query suggestions and the search query suggestions and the Office add-ins or Outlook Web Access add-ins are in preview, you can only generate those by using Yo Microsoft SharePoint, and then you do plus beta. Just wrote it today, but I just can't get it in my mind. So, so basically, what you do is that you execute the Microsoft and SharePoint, and there's multiple here typos, so that's fine. You execute the Yeoman Generator in the plus beta mode, and that will then generate the plus beta options to be available within your solution. Now, in the case of Office add-ins, as an example, if you execute and create a web part using the plus beta option, will auto-generate you an Office add-in folder, and in the Office add-in folder will auto-generate you an example manifest, which you can then use to get your solution available in Outlook Web Access. So basically, how things work in practice behind the scenes is that you can take any of your existing, you could actually take any of your existing web parts as well and make them available in Outlook Web Access. And behind the scenes, what happens is that we are basically just automatically pointing to the, that's getting replaced automatically based on a tenant URL to a URL, which is _layouts15 Outlook hosted web apps, ASPX, and then component ID equals something. This is basically an ASPX page hosted or automatically hosting your component for Outlook Web Access from SharePoint. So you don't have to worry about, again, deployment, hosting, any of that stuff. Everything is getting fully automatically available for you. And you can even have a configuration option available. So is there a one-time configuration option available or not? I will explain. All of that is going to be explained more detailed in the documentation when it's available. But what it then means is that you can actually go to Outlook. I think we have a simple example in here. It is actually that exactly the example, and you can expose your Office, or you can implement your Office add-ins using SharePoint Framework. And again, the naming and all of that terminology is super confusing, because why are we implementing Office add-ins using SharePoint Framework? But all of that is getting renamed sooner or later. In this case, it is a super simple example. We are in this is getting basically rendered from the tenant in the context of that email, and you can get access on the email and Office.js context. So you can actually have access directly on the Office JavaScript SDK from the web part, so to say. Well, I wouldn't call it a web part anymore, because it's not a web part, because it's Office setting. But anyway, highly confusing terminology. In this case, I'm just testing in one of our eDocs, so in early environments, and there seems to be still some hiccups related on getting the Office context moving into the other side. So we need to figure out what's going wrong there. It might be probably just a setting which hasn't been enabled on this environment. But anyway, you can implement any kind of configurations. You can still you get access on Microsoft Graph super easily. You can get access on the third-party components without any Azure level requirements. You can do all of that configuration in the same way as in SharePoint Framework. Our SharePoint Framework Teams apps going to replace Yo Teams apps? We'll see. We'll see where we will go. Let's see what the community wants us to do and what's going to happen. So obviously, we do work together with Victor and the Teams people related on this and the future of the Teams balance. So we'll see what will happen. Anyway, there's a understandable requirements of having a SaaS applications exposed as an Teams application, Teams tabs, and that's a slightly different scenario than exposing a SharePoint Framework web part as a Microsoft Teams tab, or SaaS application being exposed as an Office setting versus enterprise application being built using SharePoint Framework tooling being exposed as an application in here. Now, we are running pretty fast out of time. That's a quick recap on how things will work in the Office Settings side of the house. And then the final option, let me actually do this. If I execute this one, Yeoman Generator in the plus beta mode, you will actually have a new option available in the extensions as long as you use, again, SharePoint Framework option. I'm going to use the current folder. And it doesn't really matter what we answer in this. In this case, if I choose now the extension option, we can actually see a new fellow available here, which is search query modifier. So search query modification or modifier extension is going to be part of the 1.10 release. And that's basically a, let's see, where do I actually have it? It's a specific extension which has been built using SharePoint Framework tooling and SharePoint Framework solutions. So basic structure and everything else is looking exactly the same. But in here, what you basically have is a base search query modifier component, which you extend, and then you're able to override the query text as an example. Quite simple extension. You're able to decorate the text, you're able to validate the text. I think in our Ignite demo, we made a translations related on the text which we're using, so added a additional translations on the text. Is it super useful? Is it super powerful? Well, not necessarily. I think the community will come up with a interesting set of capabilities, but this is just a start related on the search level extensibility as well. But search will support extensibility in this level as well, and it's being implemented using SharePoint Framework. So this comes to preview in 1.10. Now, looking on to time, I'm going to actually stop here, and that's going to be all on my side. So let's actually jump on the final slides on the presentation and close up for today.
All right. So thanks to David, thanks to Joel, thanks to Vesa for 3 great demos. Excited to see that stuff. And again, reminder, if you'd like to demo on one of these calls, please reach out to myself or Vesa. Would love to get you on a call. Our next SPFX JS meeting is going to be January 16th, so that's in 2 weeks. And then our next general dev SIG meeting will be January 9th. That's next Thursday. So look forward to seeing you at both of those, hopefully. So welcome to 2020, everybody. Thanks for being with us on the journey in 2019, and look forward to things getting even better and growing more here in 2020. So thank you. Happy New Year, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.